Hello and welcome to an overview of the 7th Seraph weapon set in Destiny 2 Season of the Worthy. In this video, I'll be going over all 6 of the 7th Seraph weapons in this season, and going over their objective facts, how they compare to other weapons in that same archetype, and how they compare to other weapons in the game, and giving my thoughts on each. Something to note about these weapons is their unique mechanic called Warmind Cells. I won't be factoring this too heavily into my objective assessment of them, but it does affect my opinion. However, to activate these mechanics, you do have to use the seasonal mods in the Worthy Armor socket. This will also work on Season of the Dawn armor sockets, as well as whatever next season is, Season 11. So you have to use one of these mods in order to let your weapon spawn the Warmind Cells. There's a great write-up of these mechanics, which I will link in the description of this video. Just let it be known that Warmind Cells are very powerful. However, after this season, the only way to use them or spawn them is going to be through these weapons. However, right now, using the artifact, you can spawn Warmind Cells with Hammer of the Warmind and Tyrant Surge. So, without out of the way, let's get into it, and we'll start off with the hand cannon. The 7th Seraph Officer Revolver. This is a 180 RPM precision hand cannon. Some of this weapon's notable stats are 35 range, which is below average for this archetype, 54 reload speed, which is average for Trust and Optative, the energy hand cannons in this archetype, but much higher than the Service Revolver, which is the other kinetic of this archetype. This weapon also reports 9 magazine in the API, and that holds true for the other 3 180 RPM hand cannons. However, in game, as you can see, this weapon actually only holds 8 in the magazine. The other 3 hold 9. As far as perks go, this can get your standard ballistics perks. You can get tactical mag on it, which is nice. Appended mag, also a good option. Flared mag, well, is okay, but with this thing's mag size, you really want to boost it up. In the first column, you can get Threat Detector, Ambitious Assassin, or 4th times the charm. Those are the 3 that I would recommend. In the second column, you can get Vorpal Weapon, Multi-Kill Clip, Feeding Frenzy, or High Impact Reserves. Those are, again, what I would recommend in that column. Now to an objective comparison of this against a comparable hand cannon, this pretty basic Spare Rations. Spare Rations being a 150 RPM lightweight hand cannon, which holds 13 in the magazine. That's above average for its archetype. However, comparative to this, I think it's an auspicious start that this only holds 8 in the magazine. So I did my testing with appended magazine on the Officer Revolver just to give it a little more of a fighting chance. So in terms of crit DPS and sustain, so just firing off your entire magazine, reloading, and immediately starting firing again, Spare Rations achieves about 1,880 DPS on red bars in the Leviathan entry encounter, whereas the Officer Revolver achieves 1,502 DPS. Their crit modifiers, Spare Rations has a 1.6 times modifier, whereas the Officer Revolver has a 1.495 modifier. So Spare Rations benefits a little more from crits, but the Officer Revolver isn't, going to be a body shot monster or anything. The body shot DPS of Spare Rations sustained is 1,172. The Officer Revolver is 1,004. So somewhat comparable in body shot damage, but the crit damage per second gets way out of hand. They hold about the same in reserves. Total for the Officer Revolver is 120. And total for the Spare Rations is 117. However, given that Spare Rations does much more damage than the Officer Revolver on a shot, that means that the Officer Revolver is going to lose out on total damage output and, damage in the mag. It just doesn't have as much damage to compensate for its fire rate. So, with that objective analysis aside, my opinion on the 7th Seraph Officer Revolver is that it is probably one of the better 180s you can get, and I know these are popular on console. However, it requires a lot of bonuses to make it work. So Vorpal Weapon is unique on this archetype. All the 7th Seraph weapons can get Vorpal Weapon, by the way. This is a pretty handy perk in, I think, higher level content. However, even among the 180s, you can get Rapid Hit or Outlaw on the other 3, Service, Revolver, Trust, and Optative. You can get those perks on all the other 3, so you already have a much better reload speed on those than you have on this. Plus, Kill Clip is better than Multi-Kill Clip in the vast majority of circumstances. So this weapon doesn't really have a standout perk that makes it super good, other than Warmind cells. I think using this, you pretty much immediately just run into the fact that the magazine size is so limited, the reload speed is, not amazing or anything to compensate for that, and the damage just doesn't stack up against other weapons. Even on console, I think you would just use a 150 or 140 or a 110 anyways, because in PvE, your accuracy isn't really the most important thing if you're just spraying bullets at enemies. So I think it makes a lot more sense to use one of those slightly harder to use, but much more effective archetypes of hand cannon over this. That is my opinion on the Officer Revolver. Next, let's move on to the SMG. The 7th Seraph VY7. This is a 600 RPM precision SMG. Some of this weapon's notable stats are 48 stability, which is above average for this archetype, and 30 inventory size, which this weapon shares with the Antiope D as an advantage over the other 3 precision SMGs. In column 1, the best perks you can get are Ambitious Assassin or 4 times the Charm. However, there's only 4 perks in this first column, so it won't be super hard to hunt for these, I think. In the second column, you should go for either Feeding Frenzy or Vorpal Weapon. Now looking at the stats of this weapon against a comparable meta option, which is the Recluse. First of all, in inventory size, the Seraph SMG can hold 352 rounds, whereas the Recluse can hold 455. The crit modifier for the Seraph weapon is 1.4, versus the 1.65 for the Recluse's lightweight archetype. So this is definitely more forgiving. You're not losing as much if you don't have as much accuracy with this. And remarkably, actually, the body DPS of these 2 weapons is very similar. It is 1,441 for the SMG. This is just emptying your entire magazine, reloading, starting again. And then for the Recluse, you get 1,453. So very similar there. However, due to that crit multiplier, the Recluse does take a big lead in crit DPS. It will do 2,398 DPS to the head, whereas the Seraph SMG will do 2,026. So around 15 to 20% lower for the Seraph weapon. And compounding that, the range on the Seraph SMG starts about 1 meter further out than the Recluse. 15 meters to 14 meters is about where range drop-off starts, respectively. And then they both top out about the same maximum drop-off at around 31 meters. And in terms of total damage output with body shots, you've got 93.6 thousand in the Seraph SMG and 83.2 thousand in the Recluse. So to my opinions about this weapon, I think this is by far the best Seraph primary you can use. 4 times the Charm is actually pretty excellent on an automatic weapon. And especially on this, where it's pretty easy to control, it really does give you a lot of free ammo. And especially given that this is an SMG where your ammo reserves are limited, that is a welcome thing. Feeding Frenzy, also nice because these don't have the greatest reload speed. Overall, this weapon is really just enjoyable to use. Like, it doesn't really fall down in any category, I would say, other than just not having a little bit of range versus the Recluse. The main pain point with this is that it doesn't come with scope options. 3 of the other 4 precision SMGs, Antiope D, Atalanta D, and Bad Reputation, all can come with medium zoom scopes, which boost their range significantly outwards, which is great for an SMG, which has limited range. You also then have to consider that every waking moment, which can't roll a scope, can get Outlaw and Kill Clip, which is obviously a fantastic combo. This weapon doesn't have anything like Kill Clip, it just has Vorpal Weapon. However, the Warmind Cell mechanic, like I said before, is powerful. And I think if you're going to try and access it, and I think you might want to access it after the season, it is actually good, then this is I would say the best way to get it. SMGs are decent. They're usable in high level content. You just have to play around the range better. This just doesn't have too many actual downsides, so I can actually recommend the 7th Seraph VY7. So now moving on to the auto rifle. The 7th Seraph Carbine is a 450 RPM precision auto rifle. Some of this weapon's notable stats are its range, stability, reload speed, and aim assist, which are all below average for this archetype. I believe aim assist is the lowest for this archetype. However, it does have an above average 74 recoil direction, and it holds one more in the magazine than other precision auto rifles. Unfortunately, you cannot get tactical mag on this, but you can get, your other mainstays. Appended mag, flared mag, well, high cals, whatever you want. In the first column, you can get 4 times the charm or threat detector. Those are the 2 I would recommend. In the second column, you can get Vorpal weapon, swashbuckler, or rampage. And that is, again, what I would recommend. Maybe rangefinder if you really want to use this in PvP, but I wouldn't. Comparing this to another meta option, we're going to look at an Ether Doctor, which is the 600 RPM. This particular one has a King.K2 scope, which increases its zoom by 2. I believe that is a base 16, so this has 16. And my Ether Doctor should have 18 here. So given the objective stats, the Carbine can hold 487 rounds in reserve with no reserve perks. The Ether Doctor, however, can hold 704. Yeah, so the Ether Doctor as well basically just trounces the Carbine in every other stat. So the Ether Doctor achieves a critical DPS of 2,141 against Leviathan red bars, whereas the 7th Seraph Carbine achieves 1,798 DPS, notably lower. And these weapons both have the exact same crit modifier, so the body shot numbers are also exactly proportional. Ether Doctor does 1,333 DPS to the body, whereas the 7th Seraph Carbine does 1,119 to the body. And as you can imagine, given the inventory size discrepancy, Ether Doctor holds about 132,000 damage in total reserves and body shots, whereas the 7th Seraph Carbine holds about 98,000. So not close. Also, just to give you an idea of the importance of a scope on these, the Ether Doctor having the +2 zoom scope, for it, the range drop-off starts at around 28 meters, and you can see they have pretty comparable range in this direct head-to-head of the in-game stats. This just has the higher zoom scope. So the Ether Doctor starts drop-off around 28 meters and finishes drop-off or reaches max drop-off at around 72 meters. The Carbine starts drop-off at 26 meters and ends drop-off around 64 meters. So the point at which they start dropping off isn't too different, but the point at which they will stop dropping off and the preservation of damage across range on Ether Doctor is notably better due to its scope versus the Carbine. And it's worth mentioning as well that the Ether Doctor can get even higher zoom scopes, +4 on the medium zoom scopes, and I don't know exactly offhand on the long zoom scopes, but notably higher. This will improve your primary's performance at range significantly compared to ballistics, which is what the Carbine has access to. So that's an objective overview of the weapon. My opinions, if it's really a 450 that you want to use, this isn't the worst one. 4 times the charm is nice, Vorpal weapon is nice, rampage, swashbuckler, all nice perks. They aren't incredibly unique, but they work. Overall, this weapon has a nice feel, and I can see some people liking to use it and using it despite other options existing, just because they like the feel. And that's fine, but I think in higher end content, you're going to find that this really starts letting you down compared to something like the Ether Doctor or any of the many 600 RPM or 720 RPM auto rifles in the energy or kinetic slot, like Steel Feather Repeater, Galliard 42, Arc Logic, Gnawing Hunger, the Summoner, Valakadine, the list goes on and on. There are just so many options that outperform this thing. Plus, the only thing it has access to this season as far as mods go is overload rounds. And if we take a look at the artifact, there are a lot of ways to get overload capabilities this season. You have Disrupting Blade on swords, you have Surge Detonators on arc grenades, you have Hammer of the Warmind, which comes on any Warmind cell. So these are all things. Oh, and you also have sidearms and hand cannons and SMGs. Not to mention Divinity, all things that can do overload. So to me, overload rounds are not something that really brings a lot of value to this weapon this season. So I think just a weapon to use if you like the feel of, don't take it into higher end content. Now moving on to the 7th Seraph SI2 Sidearm. This is a 360 RPM sidearm in the lightweight frame archetype. Here are the stats for this weapon. The only other weapon of this archetype to compare to is the Anonymous Autumn from Crucible. So this weapon has lower range and stability, but it does have 69 handling, nice, which is higher than the Anonymous Autumn. Both of these weapons report 15 round magazines in the API, but they do only hold 14 in-game. In column 1, you can get full auto, Demolitionist, Threat Detector, or Field Prep. I would personally recommend Demolitionist or Field Prep the most out of those options. And, you know, there are other perks too, but those are the 4 that I would recommend taking. In column 2, I think pretty much the only thing to go with is Vorpal Weapon. The other perks aren't bad or anything. It's just that Vorpal Weapon is the only thing that'll give you extra damage. Speaking of damage, let's talk about hard numbers. Comparing this to a more meta sidearm that I could think of, which is the Breachlight. Now note that this is kinetic. I have adjusted the damage numbers from Breachlight down to account for the 5% bonus damage the kinetics get in PvE activities. And just to illustrate that, I have here a clip of me shooting a 722 RPM kinetic sniper and a 72 RPM energy sniper. And you can see that they do essentially 5% extra damage for the kinetic. It's something like 4.98 trailing digits. 5% is good enough for us. So in terms of inventory size, the 7th Seraph holds 145 rounds in reserve. Breachlight holds 284. You have to take into account that this is an aggressive burst sidearm. That means it shoots in bursts of 2. So it makes sense that it's, you know, in the order of twice the total reserves of the Seraph sidearm. For critical DPS, the Seraph sidearm does about 2,452 damage DPS against Leviathan red bars, whereas Breachlight does 2,593. For body shot damage, they both have the same critical multiplier, so this will be proportional. They do 1,744 DPS for the Seraph sidearm, and 1,846 for Breachlight. Now, in terms of total amount of damage you have in your reserves, something funky goes on because Breachlight takes comparable to twice the time to fire as the Seraph sidearm, which kind of makes sense because it has, you know, a notably larger magazine because it's shooting 2 shots every time. However, the damage on the Breachlight isn't actually that much different from the Seraph sidearm, which kind of also makes sense, right? 325 to 360 RPM fire rate. It makes sense that they would be pretty similar. However, Breachlight and other burst sidearms have much higher inventory size to account for the fact that they have larger magazines. So what this ends up meaning in practice here is that our Breachlight holds 143,000 damage in reserves for body shots, whereas the Seraph sidearm holds only 70,000, less than half. And keep in mind, I'm accounting for the 5% extra damage bonus on Breachlight. So those are the objective facts I can give you about this weapon. My personal opinion on the sidearm is that it is probably one of the better sidearms in the game. You know, if you're going to use a sidearm, this is certainly good because mainly I think you can get Demolitionist or Field Prep. Field prep is drastically underrated. It increases your inventory size, which is fantastic on a sidearm or an SMG, where you don't necessarily have a huge inventory size in the first place, and it gives you a free, very quick reload when you crouch, and crouching is not difficult to weave into your play once you are trying to actively go for it. So I think this sidearm can get some really decent rolls, and there's nothing about it that really calls out as a minus or like a reason not to use it, other than the fact that, yeah, its total damage is pretty low, but compared to something like Breachlight, or even compared to something like Drang, which just has naturally higher zoom than other sidearms, it's hard to make a case for this sidearm. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. You know, going into future seasons, this is one of the better options if you want to generate Warmind cells with your primary. However, in this season, it's not the best option, I think. Now moving on to the 7th Seraph CQC-12, the shotgun. It is an 80 RPM lightweight frame shotgun. Here are this weapon's stats. Note that it has below average range for its archetype and below average aim assist. However, it has significantly higher inventory size than the average and a pretty good recoil direction of 56. In column 1, you can get quick draw or auto-loading holster. Those are the two I would recommend. Quick draw obviously for PvP, but it also just makes it, you know, feel nicer in PvE. In the second column, you can get either Vorpal weapon or trench barrel. Those are the only two I would really recommend for using this in PvE activities. Comparing it objectively against what I think is still a fairly meta shotgun, which is the rapid fire archetype, and specifically in this case, the Aikilos shotgun V1.0.1. The Aikilos will hold 25 rounds in inventory, whereas the Seraph shotgun will only hold 15. They actually, in DPS terms, compete a lot better than I thought they would. So the Seraph shotgun, emptying all 6 rounds, reloading all 6, and then firing again, achieves a body shot DPS of 3,423. I did not measure crit modifiers for this, but I believe they should be pretty similar, if not the exact same, for, I believe, all shotguns. Anyways, Seraph shotgun gets 3,423 DPS against orange bars on the Leviathan. So note that I'm using orange bars for this and the machine gun test, not red bars. So these numbers do not exactly correlate comparing to the primaries that we've already discussed in this video. The Aikilos shotgun achieves a body DPS of 3,600 even. So pretty close there. Total damage output is a little different since the Aikilos obviously has 25 rounds in reserve compared to 15 for the Seraph. That's quite a difference. The Aikilos shotgun holds 94,500 damage in reserves, whereas the Seraph only holds 83,000. And again, this is without any mods or perks to increase reserves. So that's the objective info I can give you on this weapon. Overall, my thoughts on it are, I'm surprised by the DPS numbers that I found, to be honest. I didn't expect it to be that good. But it is actually quite good. I believe Trench Barrel is best suited for the low rate of fire shotguns. So Imperial Decree is the king in that regard. But this is definitely a decent option. You get Trench Barrel. It's nice to use. It doesn't feel as clunky as Imperial Decree can in PvE. And, you know, it'll let you change it up if you're used to the rapid fire frames and you want to try something different. Auto-loading holster is very nice, and I really, really enjoy the way this weapon looks and sounds. It is, I would have to say it's my favorite shotgun, really, just in the game, based on looks and feel alone. Overall, not game-breaking or anything. It's not the Aikilos shotgun when that was first introduced, but this Seraph shotgun is quite good. You know, you can do a lot worse. Shotguns, not incredibly distinctive across archetypes other than the rapid fires in PvE, but this is a good option. And finally, moving on to the 7th Seraph SAW Squad Assault Weapon. This is a 360 RPM high-impact machine gun. Here are this weapon's stats. Note that it has below-average stability, handling, and aim assist for this archetype. It also holds 43 in the magazine compared to 44 for the fixed odds and 48 for the Bane of Sorrow. The real kicker in the stats here is the recoil direction, which is 41 compared to Bane of Sorrow's 69, nice, and fixed odds 66. That is incredibly low, 28 points lower, and I don't know why, but fast forwarding to my opinions about this, this is one of many factors that I think feeds into me feeling like this weapon is just god-awful to use. But let's move on to perks and objective statistics about its performance. So column 1, I would recommend Clown Cartridge, Field Prep, or Autoloading Holster. Obviously, all reload-based perks. Clown Cartridge is just a good perk. It's always going to be doing things for you. Field Prep, like I said earlier, in the Sidearm segment is a fantastic perk, and especially comes alive on heavy and special weapons like this. In the second column, I would really only recommend Vorpal Weapon or maybe Mulligan. Mulligan, giving you ammo back when you miss a shot is just nice, right? Like using a heavy weapon that can actually regenerate ammo in kind of a backwards way is nice. Vorpal Weapon, obviously you're going to be using this thing against higher tier enemies and vehicles and such. You might as well use Vorpal Weapon. Now, this weapon can roll Firing Line in the second column. I think that perk on this weapon is a bit of a noob trap. We'll get into the statistics in a second, but Firing Line, 25% extra damage precision when you're in the proximity of 2 other allies. Sounds appealing. On this weapon though, the base DPS is so low, you should just stick to the consistent 15% of Vorpal Weapon on whatever you can get it on. Moving on to the stats, the Squad Assault Weapon here holds 243 rounds in reserve compared to the Delirium's 389. Now for a weapon that fires almost a third as fast, that's pretty good. The Squad Assault Weapon also, in terms of total body damage in reserves, holds 142,000 compared to the Delirium, which holds 122,000. So that's favorable, but that's where the favorability ends. The Squad Assault Weapon has a higher crit modifier for one thing, but even with that higher crit modifier, it does 2,862 DPS to orange bars on the Leviathan. Compare that to 21% Delirium, which with no stacks of killing tally, no spec mods or anything, just 3,833 DPS to orange bars on the Leviathan. And it gets worse with body shots because the Squad Assault Weapon has a higher crit modifier. So Delirium does 2,952 DPS. The Saw does 2,038 DPS to the body. So that's the statistics of this weapon. There's your objective facts. On to my feelings about this weapon. I hate this thing. Oh my god, it feels so clunky. It feels like I'm trying to drive a giant truck over an Indiana Jones style wood and rope bridge that's all broken down in the rain and the truck has 2 flat tires. And if the damage were better, then, you know, I could get over it. Because, you know, having higher total damage but a slower damage output, fine, you know, that's a trade-off. That is one of the inherent things of balancing a weapon. You have a 360 RPM versus a 900 RPM. It's pretty reasonable to expect the lower impact or the lower rate of fire one is going to hit harder but not be as fast and be a little more unwieldy to use maybe in certain respects. I think that's fine, but here this doesn't even feel like a heavy weapon in high-end content. It feels like a glorified primary. Compared to Bullet Hoses, Delirium, Temporal Claws, and Edgewise, which even without damage perks, those weapons all actually feel like they have power weapon DPS. When you take them out, when you have a champion that's stunned and you need that to die quick, then those 900 RPM guns will get that done for you. It feels like you're draining a health bar quickly. These 360s feel like you are plinking them with a Nerf gun. This specifically, with its recoil direction and stability, is probably the worst feeling weapon out of probably the worst feeling archetype in all of Destiny 2. If you like this, you know what? Sure, use it. It's got decent total damage output. It's got decent range, pretty okay perks. I just can't with this thing. Alright, and that is my overview of all of the 7th Seraph weapons in Season of the Worthy in Destiny 2. I hope you enjoyed this look at them and my thoughts on each one in its archetype and compared to other weapons of that type. If you enjoyed this video, a like is appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.